All right, we are live and back at it. I am Dan Vasco. That is Remy. And as you can see, yeah, there you go. Say hi, Remy. This is obviously a solo show today here on the Football Lounge. No Mark this week, but we're excited to get him back soon on the show, on the airwaves. We do have a Super Bowl plane update, though, from Mark to discuss on the episode today. And boy, do we have a stacked show. I feel like I say that every week, but it is the case once again here to wrap up week 13. The Bears finally did it. The Bills showed up on a snow day. The Cardinals continuing to stumble. Bo Nix might be the real deal. Much more to get to here in our week 13 recap. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right, this is the Football Lounge with Mark and Dan, although it's the Football Lounge with Dan here today, but excited to have you here with us listening to this Week 13 recap episode where, as we talk about, basically post Thanksgiving, maybe, it's getting into November, the road continues to get narrower and narrower as we get close to the playoff push here in the 2024 NFL season. So excited to talk a lot about the Turkey Day games, about a lot of these interesting narratives that are either being bucked or being confirmed. But one of those things that is a little bit different, a narrative that is bucked, is that the Chicago Bears completely broke precedent, making history the first time in the 100 plus years of existence that the Chicago Bears have fired a head coach mid-season. We thought we wouldn't see the day, and that came early. Christmas came early here on Turkey Day for the Chicago Bears fans and the Chicago faithful. Look, this was a bit of a surprising move, and I know a lot of people, probably a lot of our listeners here, were excited to get Mark's thoughts. Don't worry, there will be plenty of time for that. We're going to get Mark's thoughts on the Bears making this move, but just to unpack this a little bit from my perspective, it was obvious, right? This was a choice that many had been screaming for even before the season began. Mark was one of those people that really didn't want Eberflus to run it back, but once that decision was made, you ride with it and you try and see what you can get out of Caleb Williams and this regime, and hope to make it work. It didn't. They ended up firing Luke Getsy earlier in the season, just a few weeks ago. The offensive coordinator, things were not getting done and working properly. Thomas Brown steps in to call offensive duties, and the offense starts to find a little bit of a rhythm. Caleb Williams, continues to show progression and starts balding out even in a couple of occasions. And then you get to these late, parts of the game, late the fourth quarter. The Bears have continually now had an opportunity to win football games late because they've stayed in it. Their defense has either kept them in it, or Caleb Williams has made late pushes to get it done. And then whether it be some offensive mishap, whether it be penalties, or most notably coaching malpractice, the Bears have not been able to pull out these close games where they've had an opportunity late, and they find themselves now at 4-8 on the season. Certainly not where we thought they would be when they started and got those 4 wins in the bank early on. But now, as we stand here today, the Bears are a paltry 4-8 and riding a 6-game losing streak. They were 4-2 at one point this season, looking like they were going to make that, early push for the playoffs. And here we are. They are essentially out of the playoff picture. I mean, they could theoretically win 5 games in a row to end the season, be 9-8, maybe sneak in with wild card. That is, of course, very highly unlikely. Although, hey, we'll see what happens as Thomas Brown's been named interim head coach. Can he get that interim spark? They have a road trip coming up next against San Francisco, then another road trip in division to Minnesota, and then it's Detroit, Seattle, and Green Bay to round out the 2024 regular season. So if the Chicago Bears do somehow have a miraculous push in them, they will have earned a playoff berth come the end of this year if that's the case and they get to 9-8, because that is a gauntlet of a final stretch of games this season. But nonetheless, to get back to the firing of Matt Eberflus, something the Bears have never done. This was something that not even the McCaskey family could turn a blind eye to. The malpractice that we saw on Thanksgiving Day was just one of the more inexcusable bits of coaching that I've ever seen. And it's particularly bad when there isn't any controversy or anyone really coming to the defense of a decision. There are things where head coaches are questioned for going for it on fourth down late in a game, going for 2 to win the game. An onside kick too early on, taking timeouts late. There's all these different types of things that head coaches do in this league that get fan bases riled up and upset. But rarely is there a decision made that's so baffling and mind-boggling that the entire nation and the entire group of analysts on TV, no matter what the program is, where they're all behind the narrative of this head coach needs to go. This was terrible and an awful decision. That's what we got this past week with Matt Eberflus and the Chicago Bears. More than 30 seconds on the clock after you take a sack, which was a bad sack. That was on Caleb Williams, no question about it. You take the sack. There's more than 30 seconds left. It appeared that there wasn't a timely play call that was prepared ahead of time for Caleb. And so he's getting to the line, kind of, slow going. There didn't seem to be much urgency. I think Caleb, being a rookie quarterback, has to own that aspect of it. The body language wasn't great, and it did seem a little clunky as he went to the line of scrimmage to try and call the play. But once it gets down to 25, 24, 23 seconds, as the head coach, it is your obligation and your role as head coach to step in and save your rookie quarterback from himself and manage the game. Do your job. Be the head coach of your team. Call a timeout, which they had one in the bag. You could have said, call the timeout at 32 seconds there after he takes the sack, regroup, figure out a play, do a quick play, run to the line, spike it, kick a field goal, or just take some time to regroup and come up with something else. But to not even call the timeout when the clock's ticking and now you're sub 20 seconds, starting to be like, what's going on here? Caleb then came out and said that he, realized that they were running out of time and decided to switch a play to do an end zone shot. Where, if you're running out of time at that point, spiking the ball seems to be preferable. Or, obviously, if you're Caleb, that's when you take over and you call the timeout yourself. But no, they ended up spiking or snapping the football with about 5 seconds to go, throwing up a shot that didn't even make it to the end zone, and the game is over. Matt Eberflus doubling down on this after the game was probably one of the more curious decisions that I've seen from a head coach. Most of those occasions where there is a clear miss, you, don't throw your team under the bus or your rookie quarterback, which Eberflus seemed to do a little bit. But then on top of that, you certainly don't double down and say that you all did the right thing in that moment. It is very clear to everybody watching that football game, even the most layman of football fans, that something was wrong, that they should have used the timeout, and of course tried to kick a game-winning field goal at the very least, given that they were in that position. So the Bears firing Matt Eberflus was a great call, and now this gives them a little bit of an opportunity to have clarity going down the rest of the season, not only in the direction that this team will be moving next year, but what they can start doing right now, and that is making plans, scouting 100% into candidates for next year, and even potentially looking into candidates that aren't in the league right now as head coaches that are, soon to be fired, or of course, as offensive coordinator, defensive coordinators that might be part of the cycle. We think of Mike Vrabel, who, is working in some capacity with the Cleveland Browns right now, but certainly not a coach that, has to dedicate too much of his time to the game plans and things of that sort that an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator would have to do. You got Bill Belichick out there who's not even in the league, although I certainly wouldn't go that route. There's going to be a lot of candidates to talk about, and we're going to talk more about the Bears state, where they stand right now with Mark once he returns. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. The Lions survived this game. This was looking like the Bears were going to steal one, and the Bears were going to, kick that field goal, tie it, and they had the momentum there at that point. But the Lions steal a win, and we'll talk about this kind of with the Kansas City Chiefs. The Lions are 11-1, as are the Chiefs, and to find yourself in this spot, despite maybe some poor outings recently, to me says way more about your team in a positive light than it does shine a negative light on you. You're going to have close games, especially divisional matchups every now and then. You're going to play games where not everything goes right or most things don't go right. And to be able to pull out those victories to survive, if you will, is extremely important. It obviously goes a long way to you maintaining your record, maintaining your lead on that 1 seed, but it still is important to show that even when things go wrong, you can find a way to package together a win. I don't care who the opponent is. If you're able to get victories in the National Football League, you're doing something right. And to engineer a victory, regardless of the malpractice that occurred on the other sidelines, showed, the Lions can win in a variety of ways. They have weathered the storm on many occasions this year, and they continue to do it. I'm going to kind of rapid fire through a lot of the games for this week and kind of give, some initial thoughts on them. I know Mark and I usually flesh things out a little bit more, but since we're doing a solo show, we'll try and keep this a little bit tighter. And I'll kind of just touch on a couple key matchups, a couple key things that want to discuss. But we do always talk about our best win and worst loss before we dive into the meat and potatoes of the week. And so I will do that here, giving my thoughts on the best win of the week. First off, this one goes to the Philadelphia Eagles defeating the Ravens 23-19. And the reason that I picked this one was because it was a heavyweight bout between two of the best teams in the league. Philly still felt like they weren't getting the overall credit that they deserved this year. Some of it deservingly. Last year they had that epic meltdown towards the end of the season, and things were not looking good. And then early this year, you go 500, a couple ugly losses to begin the season. Nick Sirianni has a couple antics, and you're like, good Lord, what is going on once again with the Philadelphia Eagles? But here we are with Philly against a great, defensive line, and obviously running the football is Philly's MO this season. A great prolific offense. Philly does have a good defense. They certainly have a good, front, but a defense that, has been scored on throughout the year. To be able to hold the Baltimore Ravens to 19 points, which we'll get to Baltimore because, couple recent weeks now of Baltimore being shown that they are gettable. But to do that defensively against Baltimore, and then to kind of be able to control a good portion of the game offensively, I think was a big tell for what this Philly team is, and that they are not the Philadelphia Eagles of earlier this season when they lost to Atlanta and lost to Tampa Bay. They're not the Philadelphia Eagles of late last year where they completely fell apart. They are the Philadelphia Eagles who have now rattled off 8 consecutive wins and are looking better than ever at the right time. Now, of course, I do have to put the caveat in there. There are still, 4 or 5, I should say, remaining games. They could have a meltdown and go 0-5 down the stretch, and then we'll be talking about, they did what they did last season. But right now, they are on the upswing. They are hitting their stride. They have the momentum, and they're putting up points against good defenses. And this is a team that has shown that they can, win in a variety of ways against good units. 24 points isn't, lighting the world on fire. But this was a Baltimore defense that, despite all the metrics saying that they were a poor unit, this was really more about Baltimore being up on teams so often this year early on that they gave up a lot of garbage yards. They gave up a lot of garbage points late in the game when it didn't matter. This is a defense that's much better than what their statistical output would have you believe. Um, and so the Eagles, I just got to give them credit for winning the way they did. Saquon Barkley once again, putting on a show for the team and for the city of Philly. It's quite a sight to see, and this is why I think the Philadelphia Eagles, are a team that nobody is going to want to play because of just the sheer volume of talent that they have on their offense, really, and their defense too. They're not going to be a team that you want to face, whether it's on the road or at home. This is a scary team, and they didn't need a great game out of their quarterback. Jalen Hurts, 11 of 19 for 118 yards and a touchdown here. 29 yards on the ground, had a touchdown there too. But it was really more about moving the football and getting some big plays when they needed it the most. The Eagles, very important victory to put them to 10-2 and help keep the pressure on the Lions there. Now that makes that Lions win even more important for them too, because they need all the cushion they can get. The Eagles are knocking on the doorstep. The second the Lions screw up or stumble, the Eagles are going to be right there to try and take the 1 seed from them. Meanwhile, the Ravens, now 2 recent losses, has now put them in a precarious spot because they don't necessarily have a cakewalk to end the year. They have to play Pittsburgh. They have to play Houston. They end the season against Cleveland, who certainly can play spoiler, as we've seen before. But, they got a get right game last week against the Chargers after losing to Pittsburgh. They have a trip to New York. I suspect the Ravens are going to put an absolute hurting on the Giants, and kind of get back to form there today. Worst loss of the week goes to the San Francisco 49ers. I'm the one that's got to eat crow here because I had them in our, for frequency sake podcast network rankings. I had them in the top 10 for, several weeks over the last month. Was saying, I really believe that this team is a talented group, is a top 10 group. And now I got to eat crow and say, yeah, I was wrong. It's just not the case. Their injuries piled up, of course, but they're just not looking like a team that can put it all together, even when they have healthy pieces in place. Bummer to see Christian McCaffrey go down early in this one. You could see right away he knew on that pitch that he was hurt. It looks like it's a PCL sprain of some sort. He is on IR. He is going to be done for the regular season at a minimum. Jordan Mason also going to IR, so it's going to be the rookie Isaac Guerendo taking over backfield duties there for the 49ers. Brock Purdy, once again, just not looking good. Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, they didn't get big games. I've been speaking about that on the show. They need a big game from their skill position playmakers. They needed a big game from Christian or George or Deebo. I guess to a lesser extent, Juwan Jennings. And they're just not getting that production. The 49ers are a case in point of why, when you're a fan of a football team and you go to the Super Bowl and you don't win, and people, lambast you for being angry and upset and, worried about the future of your team and getting back, show them stuff like this with the 49ers. The 49ers are a team that had gone to the Super Bowl, who people could say, oh, come on, like, yeah, you lost, but you got to the Super Bowl. You're going to be fine. You have a lot of pieces. You have Kyle Shanahan. You'll get back. And then they do get back. They lose again. And they say the same thing. Okay, well, you don't have a right to be upset because, this, that, or the other. This goes to show you when you get to the Super Bowl, the stakes obviously are super high. But even if you have a super team, winning that Super Bowl means everything because tomorrow is not guaranteed. And the next year is not. And so if you get back the next year, you better damn well sure make it a priority and a by any means type of thing, win the game. This is why Kyle Shanahan does have that narrative following him of not being able to win the big game. And he is one of those guys that's gotten there a lot of times. He's had more opportunities to win the big game than most, and he still hasn't been able to do it. And now it looks like they are for sure going to be on the outside looking in for this playoff hunt. And it's looking like they're most likely not making the playoffs. It would almost take a minor miracle at this point, despite only having 7 losses, for them to get there. That's why this is the worst loss, because they lost by 25 in a must-have it game, in a game when you had Christian McCaffrey, back. You couldn't have said that for the majority of this season. Obviously, then he gets hurt early on. I understand that. But you had Brock Purdy back, your quarterback, and you're not able to get it done. You're not even able to make it competitive. Really bad look for San Fran here. Meanwhile, the Buffalo Bills looked amazing. They could have been a candidate for best win. They were in their element. This is why they are going to be an absolute Super Bowl contender, is because not only do they have a shot at getting the 1 seed and making that home field advantage real throughout the playoffs, but they can just play in all of the elements. And we're talking about Kansas City, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, atop the AFC right now, all places where you're going to have to play in cold weather in less than ideal conditions. Buffalo thrives in those conditions. And Josh Allen, once again, was able to take over, put on that Houdini cape. We're not seeing a top receiver dominating the game for Buffalo. We're seeing Josh Allen take over. We're seeing a run game that's competent. And this may be the best Bills team that we have seen in the Josh Allen era, and that is scary. So for the rest of the AFC, for the rest of the league, they better watch out, because the Buffalo Bills are here to stay. And what a great overall effort from Buffalo, a signature kind of game, if you will, for them at home in the snowstorm, being able to take care of business. All right, so let's talk about some of the other games. I'm not going to get into the Cowboys Giants game. That was a brutal game to watch, none for all involved. The Cowboys are pretty much out of this thing, and the Giants are what the Giants are. The Packers, got to give them credit, at home, taking care of business against a good Miami Dolphins team. But of course, the Achilles heel that continues to be for the Miami Dolphins, especially in the Tua era, they cannot play in less than stellar weather. 1-7 now is Tua and the Miami Dolphins when playing in 50 degrees or colder temps. The Packers are that boring team this season that is just consistent. They're not super flashy, but they're getting competent, efficient quarterback play for the most part. They're able to run the ball very effectively. They can kind of have a big game from anyone on the team, whether it's Jaden Reed or Tucker Kraft or Romeo Dobbs or Christian Watson. Nobody's an absolute star. You could argue Josh Jacobs, is certainly. But outside of that, not really. Their defense is playing relatively sound football, fundamental type stuff that, you expect to see this time of year. The Packers are going to be a team that really people don't want to play come January, because they are a team that can play spoiler, even if they aren't, among the upper echelon of their conference. I know they're 9-3. I'm not buying them being on the same playing field right now as the Eagles, as the Detroit Lions. I will once again be willing to be wrong and eat crow for that if the time comes where we're proven wrong on that. I do think they're better than the Minnesota Vikings overall as a team. Like if they met in the playoffs, that would take the Packers to win that game. But that's just kind of where it stands right now. To get back, though, to Miami, it's pretty much season over. I mean, you're 5-7. We don't really see them making much of a run. They're not great in December, not, good down the stretch, especially when they're on the road. They don't have a cakewalk either in their remaining games. They're going to have to figure out what their identity is as a football team, because if their identity is wrapped up in playing on turf or in warm weather and kind of having all of their speed at their disposal, they're going to get got in December, in January. They're just not going to be able to make that push that all of these other teams are. You have to be able to get into the nitty-gritty of things and take it to your opponent. And the Miami Dolphins just consistently have not been that team. So these are the big question marks they're going to have to answer. Can they match the physicality when it's needed late in season, on the road, against quality opponents, against strong defensive lines? Miami, you're going to have to answer those questions. The Chiefs, I talked about it with the Lions. I kind of have the same take. They beat the Raiders 19-17 barely. Raiders had a chance in the closing seconds. Botch snap, gives the victory to the Chiefs, who have now clinched a playoff berth. But again, yeah, the Chiefs didn't look great in this game. Agreed. Mahomes didn't play great. They got Pacheco back, kind of eased him in. He didn't get a full workload. But they won it. They escaped with a victory. So if they're not even losing the games that they're completely falling apart in, where the opponent hates their guts and has a chance, people are going to say it's like the football gods or the refs or whatever. You make your own luck in life. You also make your own luck in the NFL. Every now and then, of course, something falls your way and it breaks that way. But when you start to have patterns like this is showing that the Chiefs are able to stay resilient. And whether it's they have that, type of aura that they impose on the other team that just puts them in a funk and causes them to have these weird snaps late and like, oh, we're about to beat the Chiefs. Like, what's going to happen? I don't know what it is, but the Chiefs are winning these games. They're 11-1. When the Pittsburgh Steelers are breathing down your neck for the 1 seed, when the Buffalo Bills are doing the same, you're stacking these wins, and now you're giving cushion to where, okay, if you do have a real stinker against a good team and lose, we're going to look back at these games where, oh man, they almost lost to the Raiders, like they almost lost these close games at the end to Denver, we're going to look at those and be like, well, good thing they pulled out those victories. It allowed them to kind of have this cushion for a loss here and there down the stretch and still maintain the 1 seed. So big win for the Chiefs. To me, they are still right up there. I have the Lions I have for the last couple weeks now as the top team in the league. I do feel that way. But I think the Chiefs are absolutely right there and deserve to be in contention for the number 1 team in the NFL, let alone, of course, as they stand right now, the number 1 team in the AFC. The Chargers, not a good outing. Justin Herbert did not look good in this game. They didn't get much production really at all across the board. They had a pick 6 in this one, and that was pretty much the highlight of the game. They went 17-13 against the Falcons. But again, they won the game. They won against a playoff caliber opponent, and so I got to give them kudos for pulling out that victory to move to 8-4 to stay afloat here in the AFC West. The Chargers are a team I still feel are very dangerous, a team that I don't think you want to play, down the stretch, especially with that defensive line, offensive line, the run game. Justin Herbert, I feel like, all right, this was his one, big stinker, and the Falcons didn't take advantage of it. And so now the Chargers are going to be able to go into some key crucial matchups, hopefully with, getting that stench off of them and being able to kind of learn from this loss. And so good victory for the Chargers. They now take on Kansas City on the road next week. Massive, massive game, Sunday Night Football. That's going to be very telling. And then they play Tampa, playoff team. Denver, currently in the playoff hunt right now in the wild card. And then they end the season with New England and the Raiders. So we feel pretty good about those final two matchups, right? That gets them to their 10 wins. Can they find a way to get a win against Kansas City, Tampa, or Denver? I think absolutely. They may even get 2 wins during that stretch. So we might be talking about a 11-12 win Chargers team come playoff time. And they're going to be tough to beat. For the Falcons, this was not a good look here at all for Kirk Cousins. If you're the Falcons at this point, do you just consider putting Michael Penix in? Like if he's, you know, fully healthy and ready to go, like do you consider playing him? I mean, I don't see why not. This Kirk Cousins experiment hasn't particularly worked out too well. Now I know they still can get the division, so you've got that at least to look forward to potentially, since the Buccaneers are also 6-6 in that division. But man, it's just nothing has been inspiring from Atlanta, in my view, so far this season. Going to the Steelers Bengals, Pittsburgh wins 44-38. Very interesting victory for Pittsburgh. I wasn't so sure that they were going to be able to match Cincinnati score for score and win in a shootout, just based on the way their makeup is, based on what we've seen from their offense this season. But going into the game, I thought that's probably how they're going to have to win, because as good as Pittsburgh's defense is, the Bengals offense is unbelievable. And Joe Burrow is having an MVP type season. And, really that's ultimately what happened. Now, I do think this game was a little bit more of a dominant effort from Pittsburgh than you see on the score sheet, primarily because there was seemingly a pretty big missed call on the pick six that the Bengals got to open up the scoring in this game. So if we take away, that big play, there's a little bit more, cushion there. Now, I'll be honest, the refs were pretty brutal across the board, making really bad calls for both teams in this game. So ultimately, it took teams making the bigger splash plays, and Pittsburgh did. And so I think that's really encouraging for Pittsburgh. They know they have a really good defense and can come up with big plays, which even though they gave up 31 points in this game, obviously the other touchdown coming from the Bengals defense. Even though they gave up 31 points to Cincinnati, they came up with a strip sack that turned into a fumble recovery touchdown. They came up with an interception off of a tipped pass. They came up with some big time plays and big moments. And the Pittsburgh Steelers offense did the same. Some key third downs. Russell finally finding the middle of the field and utilizing Pat Freiermuth over there. Calvin Austin down the seam. George Pickens is who he is. You're going to have those problematic penalties from him. But, he responded after that and caught a touchdown pass and made plays. So, look, the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing this. They score 44 points, the most since 2018, the most yards offensively since 2018. Russell Wilson throwing 414 yards in this one, 3 touchdowns. A career day for Russell Wilson. And we're talking about a guy who we thought was completely washed and not able to return to form from his Seattle days. It's looking like as the weeks go on, he's getting more and more comfortable in this offense. And I think they're still clicking at the right time. And that loss last week, I said I wasn't worried about it. It was a divisional game in less than ideal weather circumstances against Cleveland. And I still feel that way now. Now they return home against Cleveland yet again. I think that's a win. It's hard to beat the same team twice in a league or twice in a season. And especially when I believe that the talent gap is as big as it is between Pittsburgh and Cleveland. I think they get their 10th win and move forward. As for the Bengals, that is an atrocious defense. It's really, really bad. One of the worst I've ever seen. And so you got to feel for Joe Burrow because he's doing everything he can. But it's just not enough, unfortunately, with how bad that defense is. The Vikings get a huge win, stave off the Cardinals 23-22. Big victory there for the Vikings. And look, I haven't been overly convinced. They've been in my top 10 rankings multiple times throughout the year, but just kind of bordering there. Um, I there's just I can't say like I don't know other ways to say it than there's just something about this team where I don't feel too confident. And maybe it is just the fact that it's Sam Darnold. I'm waiting for that game where Sam Darnold's going to throw 3 picks and the running game is not going to be able to do much of anything at all, and they're going to lose, and it's going to all fall apart. But they're 10-2, man. Things are working out for the Minnesota Vikings, and they're putting together competitive games. Sam Darnold rallied them to get that victory late in this one. Vikings are a problematic team. And for the Cardinals, another opportunity squandered when you have this chance to separate yourself in the NFC West, to pull apart, to try and make your case for that title. And once again, now it's all globbed together, and you let Seattle, who got the victory, a big one here, take over that division. Cardinals now really going to have to, pull some big wins out of the hat. And some of this falls at the feet of Kyler Murray. He is just making boneheaded interceptions at the worst possible times. Yes, he's incredible at times. He can make all of the throws, make wild plays with his legs, but you got to question the lack of closing and the lack of the big plays when you needed them most. Colts beat the Patriots 25-24. Not too many takeaways from this. Pretty easy to breeze past this one. But Richardson on the ground, 2 touchdowns. So and 12 seconds left, yeah, he gets a score to get the victory. So kudos to him. It does look like the Colts are going to have their guy at least for next year, and they should give that guy more runway. Still, it doesn't have a full season of gameplay under his belt. The Seahawks beat the Jets, which, by the way, the Jets are a hilarious laughing stock, and I think most of the league is just very pleased to see this complete and utter collapse. The Jets are way worse this year than they were last year with an injured Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson as the leading quarterback of the team. Just think about that for a second. 2 years ago when they signed Aaron Rodgers, if you were to tell somebody Aaron Rodgers is going to miss a season and they're going to have a more successful year with Zach Wilson than when Aaron Rodgers returns after that, mind-boggling. Oh, and they added Devontae Adams. Throw that into the mix. They're 3-9. They were 7-10 last year. They're not going to be 7-10 this year. They'll be lucky if they get to 5-12 with the way they're playing right now. The Seahawks, big win. Now you have taken over the NFC West. You are in control. You control your fate. Get it done. The Seahawks, man, they got to sneak into those rankings there and in terms of the top 10 because they're kind of like the Packers. They don't have spectacular talent, that's dominating anywhere on their team right now. Of course, DK Metcalf's a great player. Jackson Smith and Jigba, like Kenneth Walker, they are very good players, but no one that's having a superstar top 5 at their position season for this team. And you got to give Coach McDonald credit as well for what he's been able to do in his first year leading this group. They're 7-5, top of the NFC West. They control their destiny. Commanders get a get right game of sorts over the Titans, 42-19. Jaden Daniels returning to form here, 4 touchdowns for him, and snap a 3-game losing streak. The Commanders are probably going to be okay. They're going to be in the conversation for the playoffs all the way up to the end. The division's out of hand. Eagles are going to take that one. They play them again here in a couple weeks. They've got New Orleans, Atlanta, and Dallas the rest of the way. Those are all winnable games. Probably not going to win all of them. So, if you're Washington, can you get 2 more wins down the stretch here? It's possible. They got 4 games left. And we'll see if they'll be able to pull it out. They got to get to 10 wins to have themselves a wild card shot. We've already talked about it many times. They're already well ahead of the game, well ahead of the curve where we expected them to be. So they just got to continue to improve, and they'll get there. The Texans beat the Jaguars 23-20. Good win for Houston. Divisional game, anything can happen. The return for Trevor Lawrence, of course. Brutal injury to Trevor Lawrence in this game. And what can you say about the rule? It's totally fair, and I think that um, there was rightful backlash from Trevor Lawrence's teammates as he's sliding down. Obviously, it was a very ugly scene and really scary moment. But a lot of times you could be like, "Oh, it's bang bang," like not exactly sure what happened. This seemed to be pretty clear. Trevor gave himself up with sliding, and the defender um, goes in. Aziz Al-Shair um, goes in and then lays down and drives his shoulder into Trevor Lawrence's face mask. Al-Shair has now been suspended 3 games, and I think it's the right move. He's appealing it, but it's probably going to stand. He did apologize after the fact, but you just don't like to see that in the game. And that was a brutal hit. That was one of those where I felt it was warranted for the suspension. Um, just terrible. And so Trevor Lawrence is going to be in concussion protocol, most likely not suiting up this week. And I wouldn't be surprised if they shut him down for the rest of the year, guys. It's just, he's been dealing with injuries the past couple of years. You attack on this concussion, the team's going nowhere. The coach is going to get fired. Maybe it's best to sit him down, regroup, and come back at it fully healthy in 2025 with a new head coach and a refreshed approach. For Houston, they needed this win. They go to 8-5. If they had fallen to 7-6, then it's a little scary then, because you've got teams like the Colts who then are 1 game away, from potentially getting a victory there in the division, and you don't even want to mess around with that. This has all but kind of closed that door for Houston in the AFC South. The Rams, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp back. It wasn't a big game for Cooper Kupp. It was for Nacua. It was for Kyron Williams. They needed to get that ground game going again. They have. They win 21-14. Not a pretty victory by any stretch, but you'll take them any way you can get them. They are 6-6. They are right in the thick of things here in the NFC West as well. And if there's a team with momentum outside of Seattle in that division, it's the LA Rams. It's not the Cardinals anymore, and it's certainly not the San Francisco 49ers. Can the Rams sustain success here down the stretch? And if they do, I'm starting to think that we're going to have 2 NFC West teams in the playoffs versus one that we thought maybe a few weeks ago was only going to come out of this division. The Bucks beat the Panthers 26-23. They're 6-6. I think they're going to be the winners of this division. So does Mark. And so, they needed to get this win. It was in overtime, so it was close. But we've seen the Panthers take teams close as of late. Again, still felt encouraged by what I saw from Bryce Young in this game. And so the trajectory keeps pointing up for him. We've talked about the Eagles-Ravens game and the 49ers-Bills game. Nothing to rehash there. Bo Nix and the Broncos win 41-32 over the Browns. The Broncos are starting to make waves here, and they're going to be a troubling team come playoff time. They're starting to put it together, and I got to be, holding myself accountable for my takes on Bo Nix early in the season, because I didn't think that this team was going to be successful at all because of the just complete lack of talent across this roster. But also because I didn't think Bo Nix was going to be a particularly impressive rookie with Sean Payton. And he has continued to get better week after week. Couple incredible throws. That big touchdown to Mims down the seam was absolutely a dot. Incredible stuff there from Bo Nix. The Browns fought, but Jameis Winston, the pick sixes, came back to roost, and that ended up being, their undoing there for Cleveland. But good on the Broncos. They get their 8th win. They are now pushing for the playoffs. All right, I promise you all, Mark did provide his update for the Super Bowl plane, so we're going to look through that real quick and go through it. So last week he only had first class as being the Lions and the Chiefs. First class means he could see this team winning a Super Bowl. He has now put the Buffalo Bills in there after the decisive victory over the 49ers at home in the snowstorm. That is the only change from last week. No disagreements here. These three teams I can absolutely see hoisting the Lombardi trophy at the end of the season. The business class remains the same as well, except for the Pittsburgh Steelers moving up into business class and taking over where the Bills were last week. I also think this makes sense. And I was even saying last week, I think the Steelers deserve to be in business class. This means team can have multiple playoff wins and potentially compete for a conference championship. All of these teams certainly seem like they are capable of doing that. As of this time, the Eagles and the Vikings right now, the upper echelon of the NFC. I'm still weary on the Vikings. I would probably have them in economy, but I'm not going to fight too much on that. Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Philly, all makes sense here. And then finally, we have economy, which is, he sees them getting the playoffs, maybe one playoff victory in the cards, but an uphill battle for sure, and doesn't really see this team competing for a Super Bowl at the end of the day. That's Green Bay. That's the Chargers. That's the Seahawks. These are all teams that you probably don't want to face in the playoffs, yet at the end of the day, are they able to string together enough victories in a row? They're all probably going to have to get 3 victories to get to a Super Bowl. Tall task. So no major disagreement there on that front. And that pretty much wraps it up for this Week 13 recap. Appreciate you all sticking around. If you've been sticking the whole time, well, hey, thank you very much. Please give us a like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Otherwise, you know where to get us on any of your podcast platforms of choice. And always check us out at FB Lounge Pod. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anywhere you get your social media. And please go over to forfantasysakeqc.com for all of our other shows. Like those shows, get in on the action, whether it's your betting needs, whether it's, your wrestling fix, racing. We've got basketball. We've got, fantasy football shows, obviously For Fantasy Sake, the flagship program. So continue to show some love to all of our fellow podcasters out there. But that will do it for me here on the Football Lounge for Week 13. We'll see you back next time.
This has been a For Frequency Sake Podcast Network production. For more great content, subscribe to For Frequency Sake on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.